Night of Fear in Kampala. Introduction. Night draped over Kampala like a held breath. The city's lamps cast long, uneasy shadows. The barracks throbbed with whispered plans and clenched fists. On March 23, 1974, a handful of men moved through those shadows ready to risk everything. At the center of that storm stood Brigadier Charles Arube, a soldier who had once believed in the army's dignity, now turned against a ruler whose paranoia and brutality had hollowed it out. This is the story of one desperate, violent morning when a nation's fate trembled on the edge of a trigger, a story of courage and confusion, of cruelty and reprisal, and of a single, fatal decision made in the doorway of a dictator's command post. Setting the stage, how Amin took power. In 1971, Colonel Idi Amin seized power in a swift, brutal coup, ousting President Milton Obote and reshaping Uganda's military and politics almost overnight. Amin's ascent relied on a patchwork of loyalists, many from West Nile and Nubian backgrounds, and a willingness to promote men he trusted, regardless of training or experience. Career soldiers watched as recently recruited or foreign-born troops were lifted above them. The old guard felt sidelined and humiliated. Ethnic tensions and favoritism followed. Some groups gained while others lost ground, and the army's cohesion began to crumble under suspicion, patronage, and fear. The quiet buildup. From grievance to conspiracy. Brigadier Charles Arube was not a hothead or a demagogue. He was a disciplined, professional soldier, the kind who believed in chain of command and the honor of service. Yet he saw the army he loved being hollowed out by patronage, terror, and the unchecked power of men like Hussein Marella and Isaac Maliamungu. When Michael Ondoga, a prominent Lugbara officer and former foreign minister, was abducted and killed, anger among the Lugbara troops reached a fever pitch. Many believed the State Research Bureau had been used as an instrument of murder. The death widened fractures inside the military. Ethnic grievance hardened into resolve. Arube returned to Uganda in early 1974 after a Soviet training mission. On his return, he found his old post taken and Marella refusing to relinquish it. Frustration turned into determination. With Lieutenant Colonel Eli Aseni, himself nursing personal grievances, Arube began quietly to gather loyal officers and rank-and-file soldiers who felt the same humiliation and rage. The plan matured in the dim corners of the officers' mess at Nakasero: seize radio, take key locations, and topple a president who had turned the armed forces into his instrument. Dawn of the Uprising. The operation was set for 9 a.m., March 23, 1974. But like most revolts, rumor pushed the date forward and swelled the ranks. In the gray light of morning, Lugbara troops at Malir Barracks rose. Others moved to seize Radio Uganda and Uganda Television. Columns blocked roads and tightened around Makindye and Kololo. For a fragile, terrifying window, Kampala seemed to belong to the mutineers. The plan had been simple and violent. Capture key points, cut the capital off, and, above all, remove the commander whose presence loomed over every decision. They struck with the fury of men who had been pushed too far. Busega, Natite, Katwe, the names of streets and junctions turned into battle coordinates. Armored personnel carriers rolled. Soldiers with old grievances, fresh wounds, and whispered promises moved in concert. For a moment, hope smelled in the air like gun smoke. Kololo, the last holdout. Kololo Hill was Amin's nerve center. It stood like a crag of power above the city. Amin did what few tyrants do in panic. He did not flee. Instead, he stayed and readied his presidential guards, a small unit, about 30 men, but among the best trained and most fiercely loyal. When Arube's force approached, they found not a deserted palace, but a defended command post. The assault faltered. The presidential guards resisted with grim efficiency. After a brutal exchange, the moment of reckoning arrived. Arube, impatient and convinced that fate demanded his hand, ignored instructions to wait for a broadcast from Radio Uganda. He decided the senior officer must capture Amin himself. He walked through that front door. The doorway. A single decision. Inside the dim command post, the world narrowed into the hollow click of a boot, the whisper of a uniform, and the dark weight of a rifle. Idi Amin was waiting. Not cowering, not begging, waiting. As Arube crossed the threshold, Amin fired. The brigadier fell, struck dead where he stood. Outside, confusion swallowed the rebel ranks. Men heard shouts. Someone hollered, "I have killed one! Come quickly to my rescue!" but they could not tell who had fallen. Panic drained away momentum. Reinforcements loyal to Amin, notably the Marine Regiment under Taban Lupai, soon arrived. The mutiny, which had seemed on the cusp of success, collapsed in a matter of hours. Arub's body lay as an awful punctuation. The uprising had failed. The immediate reckoning victory for Amin came quickly. The government called in loyal regiments. The city was retaken. Yet victory did not bring calm. It unleashed a ferocity that would mark those days with blood. Official lines tried to paper over what had happened. Early government statements even suggested Arub had taken his own life. Reality was messier and meaner. Amin had been wounded, in reputation if not in flesh, and he responded in a way that sent a message. Betrayal would be paid for in blood and terror. The aftermath. Cruelty, purge, and rumor. The aftermath was savage. Uganda's Minister of Health, Henry Kiemba, later claimed that Amin visited Arub's corpse at Mulago Hospital, spent 3 minutes alone with the body, and may have even tasted Arub's blood. Whether myth or fact, the story spread quickly, deepening Amin's reputation as a man both feared and grotesquely unpredictable. Amin also ordered a selective purge. Hundreds of Kakwa and Lugbara officers, many of them Christian, were executed. Some were shot, some crippled and left to bleed, others burned alive or hurled into the Nile for crocodiles to devour. In the West Nile region, punitive operations forced civilians to flee en masse into Sudan. And yet, paradoxically, many coup supporters survived. Some conspirators were treated with leniency because their cause had been popular within the army. A commission of inquiry even placed much of the blame on the government itself. A military tribunal failed to deliver the severity Amin desired. Eliaseni, one of the key plotters, was never prosecuted, and eventually he was released and even sent abroad as an ambassador. Amin ruled with a mixture of terror and tactical concession. Slaughter where fear was needed, pardons where loyalty could be bought. The human cost families were torn apart. Soldiers who once served side by side suddenly turned on each other. Entire communities fled their villages, driven across borders into Sudan, with nothing but memories of loved ones taken by firing squads or devoured by crocodiles. The uprising had been fueled by anger at marginalization and murder, but in its failure, it left a legacy of fear. The message was clear. Defiance would be crushed in ways too cruel to forget. Concessions and control. Amin still had to appease parts of the military. To calm unrest, he dismissed Hussein Marella and replaced him with Mustafa Adrisi as Army Chief of Staff. He reshuffled the military police and moved key officers. It was a careful balancing act, wield terror with one hand, offer promotions with the other. But unrest smoldered. Mutinies would flare again in later years. And the distrust seeded in 1974 would eventually contribute to Amin's downfall. Remembering Arube. Decades later, Uganda tried to reclaim the memory of Charles Arube from the shadows. In 2013, the army exhumed his remains from Jinja and reburied him in Koboko with full military honors. Soldiers saluted, dignitaries spoke, and Uganda finally honored a man who had dared to defy tyranny. The reburial was more than ceremony. It was a recognition that the past could not be buried under silence forever. The night Charles Arube walked into Idi Amin's bedroom did more than fail. It unleashed both Amin's wrath and his paranoia, leading to purges, torture, and a river of blood. Yet it also revealed something deeper, that even in the darkest days, men like Arube were willing to stand against terror. He did not live to see Amin fall, but his name endures as a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the heavy price